Hello, New Mexico, and welcome to another episode of Around the Roundhouse, a podcast featuring the policies, politics, and colorful personalities of the land of enchantment from the Roundhouse and beyond. My name is Daniel Chacón, and I'm the state government reporter for the Santa Fe New Mexican. In this week's episode, we're continuing our series of interviews with Santa Fe's 7 mayoral candidates, which leads me to introduce you to our guest this week, Michael Garcia, who is the first candidate to qualify for the November ballot. Garcia, a Santa Fe native, is serving his second term on the city council, where he has championed affordable housing and advocated for small businesses, and also where he has butted heads with the current mayor, Alan Weber, and his allies. Councilor, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always nice to see you.
Yes, always good to see you. And hola, ¿cómo estás, Santa Fe?
So in the interest of transparency, I want to start off by disclosing that I have been friends for many, many years with Councilor Garcia's mother, who is a former longtime employee of the New Mexican. What can I say? In northern New Mexico, we're all connected in one way or another. But I want to assure our viewers and our listeners that my journalistic integrity will not be compromised. In that vein, I want to note the New Mexican asked Councilor Garcia this week to remove a number of photographs from his campaign website that were shot by photographers at the New Mexican, which he did. Councilor, may I ask why you thought it was okay to use our photographs on your campaign website?
Sure, absolutely. And so I knew it was policy to not allow text language. But in the past, I know that campaigns had used photos, and we thought it was completely okay as long as we went along and acknowledged the photographers that used the photos. I mean, they are some awesome photos. I mean, there's some photos that I don't remember even being taken, and it's one of those. It showcases who I am, and so whether photos taken by the New Mexican or any other entity, individual, or even myself, I want the public to see who I am as a person.
Well, Councilor, I do want to acknowledge that you did credit the New Mexican and its photographers, which we don't always get. So thank you for doing that. But now that we've gotten that out of the way, I want to switch to very serious business. Why did they call you spaghetti in high school?
Well, actually, that nickname started off when I was a youngster. I've always been on the thinner side, and a joke at the kitchen table amongst our family was my dad used to tell me, you better eat all your dinner or else you're going to say thin as a spaghetti. And it became somewhat of a name calling negative term. As you know, within Hispanic families, that's how they show you love. They kind of give you a nickname that you might not like. And that was in my younger years. And then in high school, it made kind of a comeback, so to speak. One of my old coaches in basketball I actually went to high school with him, and he brought back that nickname, and I've embraced it, not only as a nickname, but in my college years and beyond. I was actually a DJ, and my DJ name was DJ Spaghetti. I figured, why change things up? I'm just going to roll with the nickname, and to this day, there are folks who I will have not seen in decades, and they'll call me my nickname and be somewhat hesitant. And it's call me. I always say, call me what you want, just don't call me late for dinner.
Okay. Well, I will call you Councilor Garcia because you have earned that respect. Councilor, let's talk about your candidacy. Why are you running? Kind of give us your elevator speech.
Sure. And so I've been a councilor for a term and a half. I'm going on my sixth year right now. And going through the process, I really learned that as counselors, we're somewhat limited in regards of the work that we can actually get done. I actually ran for council service initially because I wanted to ensure that there was a voice on the council of not only of my demographic, a young father, but somebody who lives in a community that's not always represented. I live in the Hopewell Man neighborhood. We're some of the most in need community in our city. And so I wanted to ensure that there was the voice on the council. And as I started to work try to work and implement policies and legislation that could ultimately improve lives of our community members, I ran into so many challenges and a lot of what I would call resistance from the current mayoral administration. For example, I've got some legislation that has been sitting, waiting to be adopted for years. And I'm talking critical legislation like reforming the fee in lieu of program, creating an office of inspector general for the city of Santa Fe. And then you get into other issues like looking at how individuals appeal land use cases and really ensuring that there's due process. And so on the councilor side, I've been doing everything I can to get policy changed, but it's been kind of slowed down. And from the mayoral seat, I would be able to work with the city manager to more efficiently and quickly get these type of policies implemented. And so it's my vision to create policy that is ultimately going to improve lives of our residents of Santa Fe, meanwhile working to ensure that the residents' needs are met. And that goes from public safety to ensuring that our roads are clean, our parks are clean, that we have affordable and workforce housing for our residents, that we began to look at how we can modernize government by streamlining our business licensing practices, our building permit practices. I mean, the list can go on. The homelessness, that's a major issue right now. As mayor, it's my priority to ensure that we establish the city's first campus-based model place. Last night, the governing body actually made it a priority. That is our number one priority in our legislative funding request that we'll be looking towards next year to actually receive the funding to begin to establish such campus-based model. And so it doesn't stop there, right? We've got to begin to look at how we can move away services from the Pete's Place location. We've heard loud and clear from residents that it's not working there. I am somebody who wants to quickly, compassionately, and effectively transition those services away from that Cerritos Road location and get it into a location where it's going to have minimal to no impact on neighboring residents, meanwhile providing the critical services to the most in need in our community.
Councilor, what is your idea? Because homelessness is a very big topic here in Santa Fe. So where would we put such a campus? What location are you thinking about?
So that's where we've got to work collaboratively with partners like the state of New Mexico, with the governor's office. She's definitely a champion in this issue and wants to be able to help. I've had conversations with her on this topic. We've got to work with other entities such as our county. The county has resources and not only monetary and land. And then we got to work with our community-based partners. But most importantly, we have to work with residents. That's one thing we have learned time and time again, and this current administration has failed to do, which is to engage residents with these critical service issues. And we need to ensure that we're working hand in hand with residents to establish community-based solutions to these pressing needs. We know that we have an epidemic with fentanyl right now. We know that we have folks that are facing economic crises, which is leading them into homelessness. We know we have a mental health issue. We know we've got veterans on our street, and that's where we can quickly begin to work with organizations to provide the critical services for these folks. Now, you asked where. I think that is the question where we ultimately need to work with the community to establish this location. As we've seen in the past, whether it's with the pellet shelters or even with some potential rumors of moving a shelter to the detention center, the residents have a loud voice, and they rightfully have a seat at the table. And we need to ensure that as we're working towards developing a location, they are working hand in hand with us to help to identify that location. For example, one of the things I've done is I've asked city staff to give me a map of all vacant city land or city facilities that might be unused. We can begin to utilize that list as potential opportunities, but there are certain criteria that might eliminate such properties, such as proximity to residential areas, proximities to businesses. You got to ensure that there's access to transportation services, access to, if they're not going to be on-site services, we have to ensure how, we have the access for folks to get to the services they need. And so I think that's where, a few of us are really looking at how we can ultimately accomplish this goal. But one thing it has come to my attention that there are some folks who are still wanting to work in silos, still wanting to look at properties. And if folks were paying attention to last night's council meeting, I brought it to the attention that, they were looking at a location in my district, in District 2 off of Sawmill Road, which I found quite disturbing. I mean, as a counselor, I should have been one of the folks that was notified, hey, we're looking at this potential property, just because of what we saw the reaction from District 3 and 4 residents when there was just, again, that rumor of a shelter being placed at the old detention facility. So again, I think I'm somebody who I cut my teeth working in the community and community organizing. And it is critical. Those first steps are taken working with the community, because if we do not engage them on the front end and we bring them after decisions are made, then you're going to see a lot more resistance and a lot less buy-in and a lot less support.
Counselor, what services would you envision offering at such a campus or a facility like that?
So there are critical services such as mental health services, job employment services, substance abuse services, economic opportunity services, and services maybe even to help folks get onto the path of acquiring housing. So having a campus-based location where all of these services can be provided at one location would be the best hopes. Dependent on the location, that might not be a possible outcome, but that is what we would be striving for. And if we do need to separate it and have certain locations that provide mental health services in one location or substance abuse services location in another, I'm okay with that as well. We just need to ensure that we can get these services up and running, get folks the help that they need, and ultimately work to improve the homelessness situation we're currently seeing in our community.
Counselor, you were the sole no vote on the contract to run the homeless shelter. Can you explain why you voted no against those contracts?
Sure. Happy to do so. So there was 2 separate contracts for folks that might be aware of the votes that were taken. And so the first vote was on terminating the lease with Interfaith to operate the shelter. And then there was a subsequent vote to bring on a new contractor. I voted no ultimately because I believe the vast majority of the problems that are being held in that community, not only in the immediate vicinity of Pete's Place, but I would say even within the 1.5 mile, 2 mile radius, that Pete's Interfaith did not have the authority to take any action. And similar to any situation where if an individual has a problem on their own personal property, for example, if somebody's causing trouble at my house and on my property, I'm responsible. But if somebody's causing a problem in the issue out on the street that I don't know, that I have no control over, it's not my responsibility at the end of the day. And I think that's where my concerns came in, is that I honestly believe that the city was not taking the necessary action to protect our community members. We know that it was a hotspot for various criminal and illegal activity. And it's my opinion that we needed, as the city, needed to take stronger and more action and really hold folks accountable that were breaking many laws and ultimately impacting the lives of residents of the area, businesses of the area, and losing faith and trust from residents that the city is not doing anything. And so that was why I voted no on terminating the lease, because I think it was the city who's not reacting appropriately, not Interfaith. And then, when we had the second proposal to bring on Urban Alchemy, I really feel that those are services that need to be brought in-house. We have an alternative response unit. We have a park ranger program. We have a public safety aid program. When we look at the value of that contract, which was nearly $9 million over 4 years, that $9 million could have been invested in building up our workforce. It's a more sustainable practice where if we build up that workforce, we are going to have a strong team that is ultimately going to support our community for the foreseeable future. Now, with the proposal that was ultimately approved, it would only be there for 4 years. And I'm somebody who wants to build that sustainable infrastructure and provide those services to residents and utilize the city workforce to do so, and not be constantly outsourcing work. That's one thing that I will get my administration away from, is utilizing contracts to do work that was typically done by city workers.
Councilor, whether it's the interfaith contracts or even the appointment of city manager Mark Scott, you have again been sort of the no vote, the sole no vote. Should voters think of you as the anti-Weber candidate on the ballot?
I'm not anti-Weber. I'm pro good government. And my no votes were based off of bad government being proposed, whether it is the way that the Pete's Place contracts came through, the way that the city manager appointment process came through, even as recent with the deputy city manager proposal that came before us, where there were not certain policies and procedures followed. And because they weren't, then the laws were changed to appease the request. And that's not how good government operates. You follow the process, you follow the procedures, and then appropriate actions are taken. And then in addition to that, I didn't really know if we needed a deputy city manager. We've had deputy city managers under the old form of government where there wasn't a full-time mayor, and the city manager was the person that was, directing the orchestra, so to speak. And it was understandable that there was a deputy city manager that might be needed. But there had been recent actions, as that taken by this current administration to restructure the government, which, one of the arguments at that time was the restructuring would lead to less people reporting to the city manager, which would make the work easier for the city manager. That's counter to the argument that was made for wanting to bring on this deputy city manager, which was there was too much people that were reporting to the city manager. So now we need the deputy city manager. So it to me, again, I'm always pro good government. That's the way I operate. And there are going to be instances where I might have agreed with the current administration. There were going to be instances where I didn't. But one thing is going to hold true. I'm always pro good government, pro good administration, and always going to be looking out for the rights and want and will and needs of the residents of Santa Fe.
Councilor, the biggest news in the mayoral race of late is the entrance of Santa Fe County Commissioner Justin Green. What's your opinion of Commissioner Green, and why do you think that you would make a better mayor than him?
Well, I've had the opportunity to work with Commissioner Green on some of the various committees that we've worked on, whether it's SWAMA or the North Central Economic Development District. But I ultimately believe he might understand county issues more than the city issues. And for example, I've seen some of his platform that he's proposing, which is whether it's to bring a senior center to the south side. That's actually work that's already in place for the city of Santa Fe. Hiring liaisons for the city council. That's already work that's being completed by the residents of Santa Fe. So I think that is a perfect example of why I would be a better mayor, because I'm already in tune to what the city is doing, what it's not doing, and why we may not be doing it. I don't need a learning curve. I'm ready to walk in and actually start sprinting on day one. We will have a 100-day plan that we will initiate once we get sworn into office, because again, we want bold action taken quickly. That's being asked by the residents of Santa Fe, and that's what my administration is going to deliver.
Councilor, one of the strengths that was touted by Commissioner Green was that he has business experience. Do you?
Well, running city government is not a business. It's a completely different running. We've already had a current administrator, mayor, who has ran a business. And that's one thing that I was taught as I was getting my master's degree in public administration. Running government is completely different than running business. Running business, you're always looking at bottom line in regards to trying to maximize your profit. That's not how government works. Government is sometimes going to make no profit, but you have to deliver those critical services to residents. That's our job. That's our duty. And it's my job as mayor to ensure that we are carrying out the services of residents to ensure that they are proud that their government is working for them. They're going to have a safe community. They're going to have their trash that's picked up on time. They're going to have parks. They're going to have their swimming pools open. They're going to have their ice rinks open. That's my job. I'm an administrator at heart. I'm somebody who's going to ensure that the work is getting done on behalf of the residents of Santa Fe. And at the end of the day, not looking at the bottom line dollar. And obviously, we have to have a balanced budget, but we're not going to be looking to maximize and make profits off the backs of residents.
Councilor, you mentioned your master's degree, which is from UNM. Go Lobos!
Yep.
Tell us a little woof woof. Tell us a little bit about your educational background, and you work for Americorps VISTA, correct?
Yes, I currently do, and so I have a quick story. And so when I was in undergrad, my original plan was to go to law school. And so I completed my undergraduate degree with the hopes that I was going to have a gap year, and then a year after enter the ranks of law school. And so I figured, what better way than to take a year off and explore and do some community service. And so after I graduated from undergrad, I entered into an internship with then Senator Jeff Bingaman in his Washington, D.C. office. That just shows how kind of wonky my brain works. You know, some kids graduate from college, go to Europe. I graduated from college and went and interned on Capitol Hill. And I knew that internship was going to be a very short period of time over the summer. So I had to make some plans for what happened when I got back to New Mexico. And so I applied to be an Americorps VISTA member. And so I applied for a VISTA member position, went off to DC. And it was while I was in DC, I was wrapping up the internship. The chief of staff pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're doing a great job. We would like for you to stay working on board with us." And at that point, I was like, "Sheesh, my dreams are starting to be realized."
Yeah.
Because that was my goal. I didn't want to be a lawyer to litigate in court. I wanted to actually be a lawyer and go work on Capitol Hill. And I held off, and I told the chief of staff, "Let me think about it for a day or two, because that would be a major transition to move to DC permanently." And it wasn't much, a day or two after, that I got a call from the VISTA project I applied for, and they offered me the position. And I'll admit, I yanked their chain a little bit, in the sense, when they offered me the job, I said, "You know what, I'm really having a great time out here." And I kind of was leading them on, and they said, "No, we understand." And I said, "You know what, I gave you my word, and I'll move back." And I did. And so it's one of those things that little decisions like that can change the trajectory of your career. Mm-hmm. Because I not only did one term of VISTA service, I did a second term as a VISTA leader, which is more of a mentor to the other VISTA members. And then, meanwhile, I was starting to complete my master's degree. Then I ultimately took on the role. I moved from a member, worked for the nonprofit, and managed the VISTA project I was a member of. Did that for a couple of years, got my master's degree, and I figured, well, I've done my time. I'm going to move to DC, because that's what my career goals were. And it was then a job opened up to be the state director on the federal side for Americorps. And that job was in Santa Fe. And I thought, wow, what better way to kind of continue my career, being able to move back to my hometown and continue to serve communities. And I did that. And I was fortunate and been working with Americorps for nearly the last 15 years. And it's one of those things I look back, and I could have been in DC, but I'm much more proud and honored to be here in the community which raised me.
Council, let's talk a little bit about the politics of this race. There's some thinking around town that you and at least two of the other mayoral candidates, Ron Trujillo and Joanne Vigil Koppler, who are also Santa Fe natives, have similar political bases that will split the vote and boost Justin Green's chances. Is that thinking real or perceived?
Well, I think that's ultimately how folks look at the ranked choice voting process. Right? If folks ultimately end up voting for one candidate, that could come into play. But we have to really work to educate our community how the ranked choice voting process works. And from my perspective, you have to look at it as, which mayoral candidates would you actually want to be in that position? And you would rank those candidates. I'm not somebody who is going to be advocating to vote for only one person. because at the end of the day, if that person is filtered out on the first round, then that voter's vote ultimately dies at that point. I'm somebody who wants a person's voice to continue on throughout the process, and I want that person to ensure that their voice was heard in the means that the not only the process was carried out by, but ultimately who wins the election.
Councilor, you're seeking public financing, if I'm not mistaken. How is that going?
It's going well. We've got a little over a week left in the qualifying period. I'm very confident that we're going to meet our goal. I am somebody who wants to ensure that the people's voice is ultimately heard, and that people's voice is ultimately the agenda that's going to be in the mayor's office. That is why I've sought public financing. I want to ensure that our campaign and my administration is not influenced by private donors. And for example, folks that are not familiar with the public financing process, the most an individual can commit to our campaign that are city residents is $205. And the way that works out is a $5 qualifying contribution, a $100 seed money, and then a $100 matching contribution once we qualify for public financing. So that's a $205 max. Whereas private financing, it's more than 10 times that per individual. In addition to that, my campaign, I am not going to take any money from any interests or any individual outside of the state of New Mexico. That we will absolutely not do. I've already had, colleagues, friends, family from out of state reaching out to that want to help the campaign with the donation, and then I've had to turn them away because ultimately we're not going to be influenced by outside money. We're going to be only influenced by the voice of residents of Santa Fe. That is the priority of my administration, and it's going to be the priority of the people of Santa Fe.
Councilor, while some incumbents who are allies of the mayor have announced that they're not seeking re-election, you will be dealing with a council that you've often been on the other side of if you win election. How are you going to build coalitions to get your agenda through, given that history?
Well, I mean, one thing I want to just kind of state for the record is I've worked collaboratively with every single member of the governing body currently. That's from the councilors all the way up to the mayor. I am somebody who is not going to look at and focus on the issues we don't agree on. I'm somebody who's going to look at and focus on the issues that we do agree on and get work done. That's my job as a councilor. And so I've been effective in that manner. I'm proud to say that whether it's been colleagues on the council or the mayor, we've effectively got policy implemented. That means from whether it's, making the city a vision zero city where we want to have zero pedestrian bicycle fatalities, all the way up to dedicating city land for affordable housing development and everything in between. And that is my priority, is to build strong relationships. And that is a perfect example of how I want to modernize government. I'm actually the only mayoral candidate that wants to begin to restructure the office of the mayor and begin to take away some of the powers of the mayor's office. And what I mean by that is currently the mayor sits in a dual, both executive and legislative position. And so for those folks that might not be aware, it's kind of like the president of the United States sitting as the president, but also being able to vote in Congress. That's not the way government is supposed to work. There's supposed to be a separation of powers. And so there's a proposal that we might be able to get on the ballot here in November. But if it doesn't get on the ballot in November, I sure as heck will be bringing it forward in the future, which will dissolve the governing body, so to speak, and you will solely see the city council, and then you will have the mayor. So the mayor will no longer be part of the body, which is called the governing body. The council will be their own entity. The mayor will be his own entity. The mayor won't get a vote on the council. And so that is one way we can begin to separate this power. That will then require the mayor to work collaboratively with the council, because the mayor would not be able to introduce legislation anymore. To get the mayor's agenda passed, they have to work collaboratively with the council. And to me, that is just basic good government. And it's one of those things we've learned with this, these first 7.5 years of how a strong mayor works and what are the pitfalls of it. And this is how I want to begin to restructure the government to ensure that residents have full faith and confidence that their government is actually working for them and not working against them.
Councilor, I want to switch specifically to Mayor Weber. You, at a forum during the 2023 election cycle, council candidates were asked to give Weber a letter grade, and you gave the mayor an F minus. Do you still feel that way, or has the mayor moved up to maybe an F in your view?
I would have to say it's still the same grade, just based off of some of the recent proposals that were brought before us. Again, I'm somebody who wants to ensure that government is operating the best it can, and we don't get work done by just strong arming and ramming through policy that ultimately has not been fully vetted or does not even have sometimes the support of the community. That's just not how I operate. And as a mayor, I am going to be somebody that will ensure the voice of the community is always met. And for example, one way I'm going to do that is I am going to have an office, a mayor's office on the south side of Santa Fe. I'm not going to just want to hold city council meetings. I'm going to have a presence there constantly in that community. We need to ensure that residents feel not only confident, but comfortable. And I think that's what folks that do not have right now. They do not feel comfortable going to City Hall. I'm somebody, let's take it to the people. I will always go to where the people are met. That's the way I'm a community organizer at heart. And that's how I ultimately get the work done, is by going to the people, and we work hand in hand, arm in arm with the community to get the job done.
Councilor, as you are well aware, a lingering issue in Santa Fe is the fate of the obelisk. Where do you stand on this issue? Would you like to see the obelisk back on the plaza?
Sure. And so this is why I've been asking time and time and time again. Not only was it for a feasibility study, but ownership study of the monument. I'm somebody who wants to make the decision that ultimately is not going to be litigated in court, and that's what we've been unfortunately tied up with for many, many years. I am also somebody who fully understands why that monument was erected there in the first place. I am a descendant of a volunteer in the Union Army. One of my great grandfathers was a volunteer, and I strongly believe we need to honor and represent the folks that monument was ultimately there acknowledging. And so it's my opinion we do need to have that monument there. Now, as far as the offending language, I'm 100% sure that we're going to move forward with removing that plaque. Right now, if you haven't seen it, it's pretty much half gone. There's just remnants of it there. And I think what greater opportunity than to work with our community, our Indigenous brothers and sisters, to really ensure how can we work hand in hand to ensure that they are represented, their voice is heard, and that ultimately we are working to build a stronger future together. Ultimately that monument there is to recognize and honor the past, but we need to ensure that we are also working towards honoring and recognizing the future.
But let me make sure I understand this correctly. You would like the monument back.
Right. And so, and I think that's where, to answer your question, yes. But my ultimate question that I've been asking time and time and time again is, could it be done? If folks have seen the sandstone that was the actual obelisk, it's more than likely that obelisk, those parts cannot be resurrected, right? So then you would have a new obelisk with a potential new old historical pedestal. What kind of conflict would that cause in the community? Now we have this report that's currently being conducted that is determining the feasibility, if it could be even rebuilt. What type of damage might have been done to the pedestal part of the monument? Could it accommodate another obelisk going back? And so it's at that point where I'm thankful that we finally have taken off that box. That's another thing I'd been asking for years. Take the box off. It will force us to make a decision. And, as we move forward, ultimately, I want us to be proud of the decision we make. And if that ultimately might even be keeping the structure that is there as is, and if it's possible to completely remove that fourth plaque and the north-facing plaque and put a new plaque, I think that's something I would be comfortable with as well. I mean, but ultimately, we as a community have not had these discussions. We've had chart, we've had people come talk to us at council. I want to be able to dialogue with the community, and I've had a lot of these conversations one-on-one. But again, I think there needs to be that education component. I think there needs to be that process where there's the community conversations happen, and then ultimately you have a process where a decision can be made. And I know there's been talks about having maybe some type of civic assembly process on it, but I don't know how much buy-in there would be from residents, given there has been that lack of trust due to the chart process. I ultimately want to move forward with a process that everybody is confident, comfortable, and will ultimately honor the final decision. Because I think at the end of the day, whatever decision is made, we're not going to make 100% people happy. There are going to still be people who are upset with whatever decision is made. And that is where we as a community have to accept that.
Counselor, I'm sure in your time in office, you've learned that politics is a blood sport. And I wanted to ask you about the Facebook account that everyone in Santa Fe knows as Jay Baker. Why does Jay Baker not like you?
That's a question for Jay Baker. And to be honest with you, I don't care. It's one of those things. I definitely understand, how a profile like that comes to be developed, right? Because there are folks in the community or folks in the workforce that feel like they have no other output but to develop such a anonymous account, and that's a perfect example of how mismanagement leads to this type of anonymous activity and attacks, etc. My administration would be so efficient and effective that there would be little gossip, so to speak, from profiles as such. And at the end of the day, government should be scrutinized. Government needs to be held accountable, because that's how we get better. We need to ensure that we ultimately are working to achieve the needs of the residents of Santa Fe. And sometimes it does take an outside perspective to point where things are going wrong. And that's why, as mayor, I will not only appoint a city manager, but appoint or work to develop a strong team that is ultimately going to tell me where decisions that we're making are wrong. I'm not going to hire a yes team. I am somebody who is ultimately going to be pointing the finger at myself first, not pointing the finger elsewhere and trying to cast blame. We've seen that happen too much. I am somebody who is not going to look at the past and blame the faults of the past administration and prior administration. Once I'm in that seat, it's all my responsibility. I'm not going to be blaming prior administrations. It's all on me. And we're going to get the job done. We're going to get it done effectively. And we're going to get it in a manner where it costs ultimately the taxpayers less money, which means we can invest in other resources like providing increased police support for our community. It's not to build a police community, a militarized community. It's to ensure that residents feel confident and comfortable that we have a appropriate amount of police in our community, and not only policing our community, but living in our community. That's one of my priorities as I will begin to work to restructure our Santa Fe Homes program and the fee in lieu of program. One of the requirements I will make is to ensure that at least 2 or 3 units, dependent on the number of units that are required, will be provided for our first responders. There's no way to get out of that fee in lieu of process. That's going to be the absolute minimum. So, for example, if 10 units were to be required to be developed by a rental developer, they could only potentially pay the fee for 9, and 1 unit would have to be developed. And that is even, if they want to pay the fee, because we will begin to work to develop a program that doesn't really incentivize the fee to be paid. Right now, the incentive is for the developer to pay the fee because it costs less than $10,000 for them to develop the unit. Now, if we had a more equitable cost that fee was versus the actual development rate of, for example, if the developer says it costs $75,000 to develop a unit, how equitable is it for the residents of Santa Fe to have a fee be paid for $10,000? Right? I mean, at the end of the day, that fee is going to be paid time and time again. We need to have a process where if it's $75,000 that it costs to develop, it's not going to be $10,000 to pay the fee. It's going to be closer to that $75,000 range. We need homes in our community. Right now, we do not need the fee in lieu of. And that's my priority, is to begin to develop and build homes for the residents of Santa Fe. We've brought in enough fee, so to speak. And even in the fee we've brought in is very nominal compared to the loss of homes. If we look at that program, since it was been developed over the last 10 years, we've brought in about $2.5 million in fees. We've lost what that means is we've lost over 400 affordable units from being developed. Now, at the end of the day, what would residents rather have? 400 units being developed or $2.5 million in the bank? I'm somebody who's going to err on the side of having those homes for residents. That means people will actually have a place to live in our community and not have to move to places like Rio Rancho or Espanola, and they can actually stay living in their hometown.
All right, Counselor. Well, thank you. And as I tell all the candidates, buena suerte on the campaign trail. And in addition to thanking Counselor Garcia for joining us today, I'd like to thank our viewers and our listeners to tuning into Around the Roundhouse. Join us every week as we talk to newsmakers in the political realm by subscribing to our podcast through Apple, Spotify, YouTube Music, or wherever you get your podcasts. For the latest developments, go to SantaFeNewMexican.com, where you can also subscribe to our political newsletter, The Roundhouse Report. Until next time, I'm Daniel Chacón, and this has been Around the Roundhouse.